Well, thank you for everyone that's joined. And my name is Catherine Ferrigno. I'm an immigration attorney. I am a part of the LA County Bar Association. I'm the current chair of the immigration section. I'm also an ALA member. So first off, this is not legal advice. This is just to know your rights. Your specific case may have factors that change things. So it's always important to consult an attorney. So disclaimer, this is not legal advice. And then we want to say thank you to some different organizations who helped sponsor. If we can go to the next slide. So thank you to the different organizations that helped us in spreading the word to get this important information out to the community. And also thank you to the Langston Bar Association, who was also a co-sponsor. And so just in terms of formatting, if you can put any questions you have into the Q&A specifically, I'm going to try to take a look at those as we're going through everything. And so if there's specific questions on a topic, we'll try to get to those questions. And if there's time at the end, we will try to take some more questions as well. So on to our wonderful speakers today. First, we have Meredith Brown, who is a U.S. immigration attorney. She has been practicing law for over 25 years, and she's been an activist for over 30 years. She is an LA County Bar Association member. She's a member of the executive committee, former chair. She's also a member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. She's traveled extensively through El Salvador, Guatemala, Mexico, Latin American countries. And she's also spoken on many news segments and radio segments, so she's a great speaker. And then Patricia Corrales. Um, Patty started her career as a deputy district attorney in Denver, Colorado. From there, she went on to work for old INS, and which then turned into the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. She was actually an attorney, a senior attorney with ICE from 1995 to about 2012. She worked on complex national security cases, and she has been in private practice since 2013. So thank you, both of you, for speaking today on these important topics. And I'll let you two take it over from here.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for the incredible response. I think we had close to 1,000 registrants. And just a couple housekeeping notes. We are planning on doing a similar presentation in Spanish for the community. And there was a question or a comment that it's geared to pretty much both the community members and not so much to attorneys, but I think we'll have a ton of really good information, particularly Patricia has just a wealth of knowledge, particularly from the government angle. And so I think it'll be very informative. Next slide. And I think it's very important to please not, if you have questions and if you're a member of the community, it's probably best to post anonymously. This is being recorded and I don't want to see case-specific information get out there in general. And also, I think if we can't reach all the questions, for one, I volunteer to help, and I'm sure Patricia will too, to do a to be continued segment. I've done that with some other organizations because there's just so many questions that are coming up. And I think last point is basically there's so many things that are changing. You'll notice in this slide presentation, I want to give kudos to the Archdiocese. Some of the ideas came from them in particular regarding knowing your risks and also kind of understanding the priorities of the ICE officers. However, in particular in Los Angeles, that's really changed. And there's a lot of very important questions about who these officers are, if they've been deputized recently, and questions about training of these officers. And so we're trying to update information is my point, because it's a moving target. So just keep that in mind. Next slide. Okay, so we have some current updates about policy, and we can go to the next slide. And I don't want to move too quickly, but I want to leave a good chunk of time for questions and for dialogue of the audience as well. So that's part of my goal here. And as this slide talks about, there are a number of changes, and we're not even talking about congressional policy right now, where Congress ideally is the entity that is changing immigration law. We really haven't had too much in the way of immigration changes, let alone immigration reform, although there is hope that something may happen next year after this barrage of enforcement. You're going to see much in the way of stricter asylum standards. We know about much fewer refugee admissions. And even after doing this slide, there are limitations to who can come to the United States, with some exceptions regarding specific, I think there are 16 countries, and the number of that is growing. Merit-based asylum, immigration over family-based, we're anticipating that in future legislation where you will be seeing people where there are certain industries that are needed. And the idea, at least, if the Republicans and the Democrats can get their act together and come up with some sort of reform, it would be based more on a Canadian style of immigration, whereby if there's a need in a certain industry and the person has the requirements, then it would be much easier for that person to immigrate. You're going to be seeing much more employer accountability. I anticipate that you will be seeing more I-9 audits in the future, and e-verify, the use of the government tool to verify that the person has a valid social security number. That's going to be happening more and more. We're seeing a shift towards enforcement of a public charge standard that's already on the I-45, which is the application to become a green card holder. But there's rumors that that's going to be more of an issue both here in the United States as well as through consular processing. With immigration reform, they're talking about higher fees. There are rumors that to immigrate after a period of a wait time, people will have to pay a lot of money. So a general piece of advice these days, and I know it's very hard for working families, but try to save, whether it's for a bond that you might need in the future for a family member, or to apply for a green card in the future if that happens. There's nothing right now on the books, but there are rumors that there could be pretty steep penalty fees that people have to pay in order to immigrate under this administration. And of course, longer processing times. If somebody could put in the chat for those that may not be, I think a lot of people here know, but the website of uscis.gov, if you go to that website, you can scroll down a little bit and you'll see processing times. And you can put in the number of your form and see what the actual processing time, according to where the receipt says your case is at. So, but that's going to be a reality. Definitely, there's going to be less resources. The whole focus right now for USCIS, if you go to that webpage, it's not exactly friendly. They're encouraging people to leave and whatnot, as opposed to what it was and what I think it is personally, which is a service organization and not enforcement. Okay, next slide. And we're seeing, as I just said, a total focus on deportation. And basically, you're seeing the famous or infamous wall. There's going to be an expansion of that, physical barriers. We're obviously, especially here in Los Angeles, seeing an increased presence of ICE and their affiliates. We're still trying to get more information as to who are the people that are rounding up our immigrant community in the streets. Those with criminal offenses and recent arrivals are particularly in danger. And after I finish this slide, I'll turn it over to Patty for some comments on who are the targets. And of course, we're seeing racial profiling, where people don't even have a chance to get that red card out, which we all have, and we can get those the link to print them out. But essentially, unfortunately, people, just because of their color of their skin, or if they're, for example, at a Home Depot, they're being basically grabbed. So the people with criminal offenses and recent arrivals, when I say recent arrivals, they're people that have been admitted or paroled, right, within the last 2 years. Those are particularly at danger, because in the immigration courts, what's happening is that the ICE attorney, the trial attorney for ICE, is basically closing immigration procedures, regular immigration procedures, such that that person will go into an expedited removal procedure. And unfortunately, there are ICE officers that are in the passageways, and there's some coordination, I believe, between the ICE attorney and their client. And essentially, people are getting detained. So, one of the things we'll be talking about later on, it's very, very important that if a person has an immigration court hearing, that person needs to get a lawyer right away and also probably get a second opinion about their case. Not a notary, not an immigration consultant, but a lawyer. And those hearings need to be virtual by a program or a platform that's called WebEx. And so a lot of us are doing motions to change the format of the hearing instead of having people be put at risk by going into court. We're asking that they can apply virtually and appear virtually. And this has been happening before, January, February, et cetera. But now more than ever, given these recent tactics, which are very aggressive, we also want to be zealous advocates for our clients and insist that they be allowed to appear virtually. And I don't know if Patty, if you want to chime in.
Well, thank you, Meredith. I do want to talk about a couple of points that you made. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this Know Your Rights seminar. It's so important to know what our constitutional and statutory rights are as both U.S. citizens, as lawful permanent residents, as those who have no status, and just basically as human beings. We are seeing an unprecedented time in our history under this Trump administration and their enforcement tactics. I think one of the things that Meredith touched upon was this increased presence of ICE. Well, we have always known that this current administration really doesn't like immigrants. And what my problem with,
Patty, you're
in terms of
frozen.
what
Let's
my
see here. Why
can
don't we go
everybody
ahead
hear me?
to the next slide? Or I don't know if she wants to go off camera. There she goes. Okay, there you are.
Oh, okay. What I want to talk about is how this administration is using their enforcement capacity, their tools, in a very inconsistent and unlawful manner, in my opinion. So one of the factors that we're seeing is this profiling. Now, the Department of Homeland Security is going to tell you they're not profiling, but they are absolutely profiling. They are grabbing and detaining individuals without knowing whether these individuals are here unlawfully or have violated the laws of our immigration laws. They're profiling because they're hitting Latino communities. They're going to car washes, they're going to bus stops, they're going to getting gardeners, and they're not asking, they're asking for identification. And by the way, there is no obligation to provide identification, any ICE agent or federal officer, unless they have, and this is really important, reasonable suspicion or articulable reasonable suspicion to believe that you are here unlawfully, that you've committed a crime, that you violated the laws of our the immigration laws of our country. Unless they can establish that, they have no right to ask you for identification, to grab you, to detain you, and that would be considered an unlawful arrest. Now, if you're asked to provide identification, Meredith and I were going to go into this a little bit more, but it's best to just stay put. It's very scary to stay put, but provide the officer with that card and invoke your Fifth Amendment right to speak to a lawyer. Don't say anything. They're not entitled to any identification unless you're stopped and you're in your car. Then you have to provide your driver's license. And in that case, that's a different scenario. Now, the other thing that I think it's so important for us as a community to understand is there's one thing, there's this conflict between law enforcement doing their job and our right to and our statutory and constitutional rights. So there's this there shouldn't be a conflict, but there is. And the reason there is because we don't know if all these officers who are and let's call it what it is, abducting individuals from the streets and their homes and from their gardens, from the donut shop, whether they're truly federal authorized officers. They are wearing masks. So in one particular instance, an individual thought they were robbers, and they could be. So if they are non-authorized statutory officers, then the different rules apply to that. And we can speak about that later. But yes, what we are seeing is profiling based on color, where you live, what type of job you do. And let's be clear about something. The law says that is not factors for which rise to probable cause.
Patty, I would love to just expand on something you just said. You had mentioned in the car you do have to give the ID. It's my understanding that the passengers don't have to, though. Is that correct?
Absolutely, Catherine. Passengers don't, but the driver does have to provide identification because he's driving the car, and he has to be authorized under our statutory and regulatory duties for driving on our highways, the driver's license. And then,
Okay.
of course, proof of insurance, right?
'Cause
However, let's be clear about something. If your passenger is not wearing your seatbelt, what does that mean? What does that do? That gives the police officer or the person who stops you what? It's a probable cause because you've now violated a regulatory or a statutory duty to have your seatbelt on. Now, it's at best an infraction, but that's enough for them to request your identification. So minor things like that can require a passenger to have to provide their identification. So
Okay, thank you. I think that's an important distinction because I've seen video of a car being pulled over and an agent saying, I want the IDs for everybody in the car, and the driver saying, nope, and everybody else in the back stayed quiet.
And
So
absolutely correct, Catherine. And I think the problem is we all, we're all scared. We all have fears. We see the police with their blue and red lights, and we're like, oh my gosh, what did I do? It's very normal to have that, but you have to also remain calm and collective and just know that you have the right to not answer any questions and invoke your right to speak to a lawyer, period.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and proceed with some more of the slides? We can go to the next slide and the following. So we can talk a little bit more about risks. And again, this is more so for the community members that might be on this call. Obviously, and I'm getting a lot of calls about people who want to travel internationally and that are legal permanent residents, even citizens. So people who are permanent residents and naturalized citizens are very low risk, in particular if they have no criminal records, and also if they receive their green card through legitimate means, not through fraud, obviously. So those folks are good to go in terms of travel. You should, if you're concerned, you should reach out to a lawyer. And the people that are listening again that are non-attorneys, I think it's really important to go to those nonprofits that are supervised by lawyers. And a little tip, those organizations, because I used to work with them, with Corrales in particular, and I was on the board of Cheerla, we always had a list of vetted immigration activists, lawyers that have the experience and that perhaps can give a low fee consultation, for example. So I think it's really important to get that in place now. And in particular, obviously, if you're undocumented or you're going through a process and you have some questions. The medium risk are people with mixed status families, that is, people that are undocumented, along with U.S. citizens and LPRs. DACA recipients, because again, the state of play with DACA is a little bit unknown for the future. Asylum seekers, and as I had said, those with 2 years or less in the United States that entered with parole or with inspection. I think it's very, very important if a person wants to go to an appointment that is at medium risk and obviously high risk, people with deportation orders, criminal records, or living in an area with high ICE activity, which is the Southern California region, unfortunately. Those people, the medium and the high risks, if you are moving towards getting a green card. Today, for example, I had a U visa potential applicant, but unfortunately that person had an order of removal that has not been completed. So in that case, it might be a good idea to wait a little bit before applying. Or if a person has an A number on their I-130 receipt, and all of a sudden, hey, this is strange, I have a case lurking out there. you can find out very quickly if that is an open order of removal or deportation if it's an older case. So it's extremely important now more than ever, now that USCIS is working a lot more with the enforcement side of things. We're hearing that there are more and more notices to appear that are being served if a person does not win their green card case. So it's extremely important. And I know the immigration lawyers that are listening, there's a lot more pressure on us, but we have to vet, we have to screen. And in this case, we have to be very conservative, right? Because we don't want to expose people unnecessarily to a potential NTA, notice to appear, if there are cases riddled with problems or they have a deportation. Obviously, Patty's an expert. I'll let her talk to this point about criminal records. There's a specialty within immigration law, which is crimination, right? Where you are basically giving advice to people that have criminal records, or you're doing post-conviction relief to get rid of, basically reopen and completely get rid of that guilty plea. But now is the time to get the information. Information is power. It's so important to take the time, make it a priority to basically get that help. And as I always say, you should get two different opinions, because unfortunately there are a lot of people in the immigration field that are really focused on the financial aspect. And you have to really look for those people that have that heart and that mission, that they're mission driven to really protect folks right now, because it's the wild, wild west in a lot of ways. And I know, Patty, you have a lot of good tips for people that might have a criminal record.
Yeah, so thanks, Meredith. I want to talk about the low risk, the medium risk, and the high risk, just briefly. In terms of travel abroad, those who are U.S. citizens, an issue, but and those who are lawful permanent residents without any criminal background shouldn't have an issue. But one thing you need to understand, if you're a lawful permanent resident and you travel outside the United States and then you return back to the United States, every time you're coming back to the United States, you are seeking admission as a returning lawful permanent resident. And the government has a lot of discretion as to whether or not they will admit you again. Now, what would be reasons why they would not readmit you to the United States as a lawful permanent resident? Well, if you have crimes, or if you've been outside the United States for too long, or maybe you have a pattern of going to this one particular state all the time, and that state is known to be a drug trafficking state. Those are very different reasons, but keep in mind the government has so much discretion when it comes to allowing green card holders to come back. I'm not saying you can't travel. I'm just saying that if you have anything in your record, you better talk to a lawyer before you travel outside, particularly if you became a lawful permanent resident and then subsequently you got a conviction. Shouldn't travel until you talk to an attorney. Now, there was a question about naturalized citizens. If you're a naturalized citizen, you became a U.S. citizen. But as a naturalized citizen, you can still have your citizenship revoked. So again, if you have crimes or convictions and you were still somehow became a naturalized citizen despite those convictions, could you be trying to enter the United States? Well, neither Meredith or I or any immigration can prevent these Border Patrol officers, customs officers from being jerks, right? None of us can. So could they hassle you in trying to, when you come back, and send you to secondary? They could. They shouldn't have any jurisdiction on U.S. citizens, with the exception of if a U.S. citizen is coming in and has committed a crime, then they can talk to that U.S. citizen. Medium risk, if you're a mixed status family, DACA recipient, asylum seeker, those who have been here 2 years, I wouldn't recommend travel. And people who definitely have criminal history or have prior deportations definitely shouldn't be traveling in any shape, way, or form. Now, if you should really experience who also has an immigration background, who can strategize and discuss with you whether or not some of those convictions can be vacated, not expunged. For immigration purposes, an expungement doesn't count. Only if the conviction is vacated on legal grounds, on constitutional violations, not because the judge feels sorry for you or anything like that, but because there was a legal error at the time that you entered a plea of guilty or at the time that you were convicted by a jury. So just because you went to trial and were convicted by a jury doesn't mean that you can't vacate that conviction. And very specific issues that require an experienced criminal defense attorney to discuss with you.
Next slide. Okay, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but again, the factors that will increase your risk to that getting into more trouble essentially with ICE interactions. Yes?
Meredith, if I can just add something, I wanted to just say, in terms of being a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident or anybody traveling into the United States, please know that they will confiscate or can confiscate your cell phones. Okay. Unfortunately, there are court cases that have held that Customs has the right to confiscate your phone, even if there's no probable cause, because you're seeking admission. The rules, the constitutional principles, somewhat suspended when you're trying to return back to the country. So I would really look through your social media, and I mean, once you post something, it's always out there, but just be careful what's on your phone.
That's right. And even people that are applying for their student visas in the consulates, that's something that is going to be more of a focus, the social media. So just very briefly, this is a little redundant, but interactions with the police. Obviously, if you're undocumented, please do not do civil disobedience right now. That's not a good idea. If you're working in ICE targeted industries, construction, agriculture, day labor, hospitality, be particularly careful, obviously. As I said, requesting immigration benefits, they're really screening cases. It's a moving target. And another tip for people, if you have an appointment, say in 4 weeks, and you entered without inspection, but let's say you've been here for almost 2 years, it's really important to be in touch with your immigration lawyer even a week before the interview, just to make sure everything is good to go. It's case by case. But it's very, very important to know exactly what you're doing. Obviously, if you're going to be going abroad, another tip, if you are going abroad, you should triple check if there are any changes in policy at that particular post. Say, for example, Ciudad Juarez, being very careful about what you say to the person that will give you a physical, because again, there's just going to be a lot more scrutiny. For example, if you had brought a child across the border, that will be an issue, and you may need a secondary waiver outside the United States that can take a couple of years. So it's really important before you leave to make sure that you have a lock solid case, you know exactly what to expect, and you should really pepper your lawyer with a lot of questions. And if your lawyer's not being responsive, get a second opinion. I'll say that repeatedly. There's so many wonderful immigration lawyers, even on this call, Zoom, and you should really seek out those folks. If you don't know where to begin, start with your local nonprofit, Caris and Cheer La Rescate, Catholic Charities. Okay, next slide.
Can I just jump in real quick? Because we've had a few questions on the phone thing. Patty, I know you had said people are asking if they can force you to unlock the phone.
No, they can't force you to unlock the phone
Oh,
at
I
all.
guess maybe
So
should we
you have a
make
code.
distinction?
And
Should we make a distinction about if you're returning and you're at LAX, right? And they're asking for your phone versus if you're on the street? I feel like, should we clear that up for people? Because I think those are two important distinctions.
yeah, so in terms of the phone, in terms of confiscating or requesting your phone, I'm talking about the instances when you're returning back to the United States from a trip abroad. Again, remember, every time you come back to the United States, whether you're a lawful permanent resident or, well, as a lawful permanent resident, you're asking for admission back into the United States. So your rights are very limited in that particular situation. As a U.S. citizen, you shouldn't have your rights limited, but that area does allow the customs to, ask to look through your phone. If your phone is on was when you put up your Face ID, disable that. Because Face ID, they can just, show your face and then it disables your phone. They can look through it. They can take your phone, but they cannot make you give them your passcode to unlock it unless they have a warrant, unless they have probable cause to believe that you've got information in your phone that constitutes a crime or potential crime or anything like that. They cannot force you to do that. On the street, they absolutely cannot take your phone if they don't have probable cause or a warrant. And it's not any warrant, it's not an arrest warrant, it's a search warrant. They have to have a warrant signed by a district court judge, a judicial officer saying that they are authorized to search the contents of your phone. I hope that distinction is made clear.
Thank you.
Okay, so talking about rights before the police, at home and at work real quickly, because again, we're at 12:35 and I want to really have a good Q&A period. Okay, next slide. Okay, next slide. So as Patty has begun to outline, we do have constitutional rights with the first, the fourth, the fifth amendments. And the most important one is to remain silent, as the commercial says, just shut up, all right? And I know that it's normal for us to, in that moment where we're just so overwhelmed to talk or try to make sense out of something that is senseless, right? It's so important to remain silent, don't lie, don't argue, don't shout, don't run away, as we had said. But you don't have to talk about where you're from. You don't have to talk about your immigration status. You just basically have to say, I am invoking my right to remain silent. This is my right. I want to be silent. And I want to also have my attorney present before I answer any more questions. And that should be under Miranda. They should stop. I know that they're not doing that there are a lot of tricks. There are police knocking at the door, trying to find a very dangerous criminal. Open the door so we can help. You can help us find that. We want to talk to you face to face. Open your car window. I think it's very, very important to remain silent, to remain calm, and essentially say, in the case of the phone, I have a First Amendment right to record, or that if you're out on the street and you're actually filming something as an observer, you also have the right to document that. And that's been critical. 10, 20 years ago, people were not so there was some in the way of documentation, but I think this is really turning the tide with what's happening in Los Angeles, because people are filming the reality of people that don't have any identification, that have their faces covered, that are just basically kidnapping people off the streets. It's very important to document that for future litigation. So Patty, I don't know if you have anything to add to this.
I have a lot to say about this topic. Thank you, Meredith, if I can. I think Meredith hit the nail in the head. Remain silent. I mean, that is the greatest gift you can give to yourself, and that is to remain silent. The most that I recommend my clients to say is, and give them their name. When they ask to see identity, unless you have reasonable suspicion to believe that I am here unlawfully, or that I'm here illegally, or that I've committed a crime or will be committing a crime, you have no probable cause to make me fork over my ID. And by the way, someone asked in the chat, well, what if they threaten jail? They can threaten jail, they can threaten detention. And I know it's scary, but if they do detain you, if they do arrest an individual, and they do so without any reasonable suspicion to believe that that person is here unlawfully or has committed a crime, then that is a bad arrest, and that it can lead to one, having the officer sanctioned, filing a lawsuit against the officer for violating your constitutional rights. The other thing I want to talk to you all about is, in this day of documentation, we see this on TikToks and on these social media platforms of what these agents are doing and how they are just grabbing people, and not just grabbing people. They're not even asking politely. They're just running and grabbing people. And some of these people are scared, so they run. The moment you run, You've not given them a basis to believe that you may be here unlawfully, and that's called a reasonable articulable suspicion to believe. That's a factor that you're running is a factor they can consider in determining, I'm going to go after this guy. So try to just stand put and give them your red card and say, I'm invoking my right to a lawyer. It's also important, if at all possible, to record what the officer is telling you, or to document, to ask the officer. You have every right to ask the officer to identify themselves, to provide evidence or documentation that they have the authority to come on the property that they're on to, question the workers. If they don't have anything like that, if they refuse to give you your identity, or if they say, my identity is this jacket that I'm wearing that says police or ICE, well, I can buy that jacket that says police or ICE in any, army supply store. That doesn't mean anything. They have to show you their badge, and they should be able to show their badge number or serial number on that badge, or their last name. I understand that there are some, and this might be controversial, the statement, but let's make clear that not all officers are bad. Not all officers are like what's happening, but they have a job to do. We, as citizens of our community, have to document the egregious behavior of some of these officers, and we have the right to videotape. We have the right to document. We don't have the right to interfere. We cannot touch an officer. We cannot obstruct the officer from doing his job. But I think an important point here is, how do we know that they're an officer? How do we know they're a federal ICE agent, or an FBI agent, or a DEA agent, or any of these federal agencies that have been tasked to help ICE, detain and arrest people? We don't know, because they're masked up and they don't have the standard uniform. Wearing a t-shirt that I saw the other day that said Fox doesn't tell me that they are a authorized federal law enforcement agent. So in that case, would that give the public the right to get involved if the officer is not identifying themselves, if the officer can't verify they are a law authorized federal officer with the rings? I think there would be a great defense argument to be made if someone is charged with obstruction, because you can't tell. So, but be very careful. I'm interfere. I'm saying there is a legitimate question as to whether or not officers are actually federal officers with authority to arrest and detain.
Okay. And in the interest of time, next slide. Okay, so rights at home, the most important thing, and we've been in this situation during the previous Trump administration and even under Obama, people open the door when they should not open the door to their home. I think if any takeaway, the right for the community members, right, on the call, please remain silent. Keep your home door closed. Tell your children not to open the door to the police. They could be strangers for that, as we're talking about. And we'll talk about, I have an example of an official warrant and an administrative kind of immigration court warrant, which is not valid to enter into a home, in a couple slides. So that just the most important thing about your rights at home, basically to keep the door closed. And there are also the red cards where you can slide them under. If they do have a warrant, I think a good tip is to take a picture of it and send it to your lawyer, right? Because hopefully everyone who has the concern of a potential arrest or encounter with ICE really should have met with a lawyer by now. You really, and again, the nonprofits are wonderful. Catholic Charities, Carecen, Chirla, Rescate, and then across the country, there are national ones as well. Or ALA can also give you referrals, the American Immigration Lawyers Association. You can get in touch with them online, and they have a referral service as well. But the point is to really have those rules of the road established with your family, and just do not open the door. I'm going to go to the next slide, and then Patty can chime in after that one, just again, to move things along. I'm really interested in showing the warrants as well. So employees have a right to remain silent at the job, right? Workers are not required to speak or hand over ID during a raid. The managers or the owner of the establishment should ask to see a judicial warrant. I think it's a great idea for all of us, right, to have your private areas marked as such ahead of time. And no one can enter a private area at a place of employment without a judicial warrant. And ICE agents may enter public areas without a warrant, but employers may ask ICE agents to leave if they do not have a judicial warrant, in particular if they are being disruptive, armed, coming into a place of business without a warrant. That's a no-no in my opinion. Patty?
Well, employers have different sort of rights, and I think this is something that's important for those who are out there in our community that are employers. Certainly, if you own a public establishment, like a restaurant or, for example, a car wash, and you see these black SUVs, sedans entering your parking lot, they are allowed to enter your public, they're allowed to enter your public place of business. However, if they're disruptive like any other individual, you have the right to refuse service to them, and you can ask them to leave your property. How an example of a recent ICE raid, if you will, at a car wash, the ICE, the alleged federal vehicles blocked both the entry and the exit of that particular car wash. They were certainly not at a car wash. There was no, there was no, there was a clear intent that they were there to pick up the workers. And in that particular case, the alleged federal agents got off their car and they immediately started to arrest and detain some of the workers there at the car wash. Some of them ran away and they chased them through the car wash tunnel. And some of them ran into the manager's office where it says employees only. And ICE agents, unless they have a warrant to enter on the property of that business owner who owns that piece of land, who owns that business, have no business entering that area, that office area where it says employees only. The problem becomes this. The owner in this particular case asserted his right. I want to see a warrant. Get out of my office. You're not allowed to be in my office. And none of the alleged federal officers would provide the warrant, would provide their identification. They didn't care. And they ransacked, if you will, and the rights of this property owner. But as a property owner, he now has a lawsuit because unless they had a warrant to get onto his property and into his office, they weren't authorized to be there. And you will see this video that's gone viral, that the manager of that car wash was trying to get the ICE officer to show a warrant. Tell me why you're here. Why are you here? What do you need? And I facilitate why you're here. Do you need something? The officer, instead of answering the manager, pushed the manager aside, pushed him. So, officer, an officer to make sure there's case sticks will provide that warrant. And in this case, none of these officers are providing a warrant. And as an employer, you have a right to demand to see a warrant before they enter into your premises and search your office or anything like that.
So Patty, just to kind of summarize, if an employer is there, like let's just say it's a restaurant situation and these people, ICE agents come in. So the first thing you're saying they should do is ask to see a warrant. And if one is not provided, they can be asked to leave.
They can. It is the owner's absolute right as the owner or manager of that property, of that business. We don't want you on our premises.
And
they
again,
don't have a warrant.
Employees have the right to remain silent throughout all of this, right?
Absolutely. And if they say we want to go to your kitchen, not unless you have a warrant. And if and employers, you've got to be strong, because you can kick these guys out. And, it's what's happening is disrupting businesses, it's disrupting families, but employers, you have these rights. Now, if they say, oh, we're here to check your I-9s, really? Better have a warrant. Or they actually have to send you a notice of inspection. Hey, we want to inspect your I-9s first. Okay. So if they're there and say, oh, we want to inspect your I-9s, you may be nervous, right? But you, as an employer, can say, not unless you have a warrant. If
And
you don't have a warrant,
how much notice is required for, isn't there a certain amount of notice they have to give for I-9 inspections as well?
that's
72
30
hours?
days.
Oh, 30
I
days.
thought it
Okay.
would, no, I think it's not 72 hours. I'm not sure the amount of time, so I don't want to be wrong on that. But in my head,
But
I thought it was 30 days.
there is a certain amount of time. It can't be like on the spot. We're here
No,
for an I-9
no,
inspection.
exactly.
So, and also, and that's a situation that maybe, would you advise people record as well? Like the ice comes into the restaurant, so someone should probably be recording that in that moment, right?
Would record as a community member. If I see these things, I'm always recording. So yes, I'm always documenting.
And Patty, just this is a couple really good questions right now. One is, if a person is not identifying themselves as an officer, as ICE, they have no ID. Do employers and people in general, I mean, they more reason just to walk away, right? If they're on the street, or to refuse entry,
Absolutely.
because they could
Walk
be
away.
thieves.
Yes, because they could be robbers, they could be thieves, they could be vigilantes, they could be members of, organizations like the Proud Boys.
Right.
We've heard rumors, of course, that some of them are bounty hunters, that they get paid for every person that they detain or arrest. Whether that's true or not, I can't speak to that, but certainly there's a lot of those rumors. So there's must be some truth in that. And if they are not authorized statutorily, not just, it's not like, you're pointing someone a king and you put a sword on them and I knight you. You can't do that shit. I'm sorry. You have to actually have a statutory authority to arrest and detain. So now there's this program called 287G under the Department of Homeland Security, but it's not clear that any of these officers are a program. And I don't want to even use the word officers. Some of them may be officers, but we don't know because they will not identify themselves.
Okay, let's move on. We have less than 10 minutes. I can stay a bit longer, but I really want to try to wrap it up by 1. And then, like I said, I am sure Patty as well, we can program another one just for Q&A. Next slide. Okay, so this is really important with respect to the warrant. The header should say U.S. District Court or California Supreme Court in case of California, signed by a judge, specifies the physical place to be searched, specifies the individuals to be searched, or describes the items that are to be seized. It's dated, and it has to be issued within the past 14 calendar days. Next slide. Next slide. There we go. So on the left of your screen is U.S. Department of Homeland Security. That is not an official warrant for entry into a home. On the right is the United States District Court warrant. The red boxes highlight of, again, it's specific, it's timely, it's signed by a judge of the district court or the Supreme Court. And then again, or just a removal order of an immigration judge. That doesn't allow entry into a home. I mean, this is embedded in the Constitution and in case law that our home is our castle, our apartment, our place of dwelling is our castle. And there was a question whether a person could come in beyond the white picket fence or the property line. Patty, I don't know what you have to say about that.
Well, there is case law on that, and they can't go on the other side of your white picket fence. They can't. That's your property. That's egregious. When you're coming into your home, they can't do that.
Okay, we just have a couple more slides real quickly. So the next slide. I think we already pretty much discussed this. The only thing that I haven't mentioned is your consulate. For the community members that are listening, you do have a right to contact your consulate. I know that as an activist, we're organizing with different consulates to make sure that there are attorneys that are available, U.S. attorneys, to help if there is an asylum case. The Guatemalan consulates and the consulados in Mexico, they're outstanding, very well organized. And if you do have connections with different consulates, I'd be very interested in meeting along with other activists where we're organizing. What you should know, pretty much self-explanatory. You can often take care of those tickets by just paying the fee without necessarily admitting guilt, or even just, I think in general these days, even though in the Los Angeles region, there's not a lot of collaboration with low-level misdemeanors or infractions where they're going to be calling ICE. But essentially, again, I think it's a good idea on the civil and the criminal side is really try to avoid attending in person if at all possible. Next slide. I think when we're talking about immigration court, one thing we didn't mention that's extremely important, if there is a person who is detained, they do have a right to a credible fear interview. Let's say they're from Venezuela, they were paroled in, they're doing everything correctly, going to court, they get arrested because the ICE attorney terminated proceedings. If they haven't had it before, they have the right to have a credible fear. A lot of people that are fleeing Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, and even Haiti that were invited in under the Biden administration, came legally, they still have a credible fear of political persecution because they were from the opposition or they're a member of a particular social group. So they probably have very good claims. So it's very important to assert that authority. Don't speak to ICE agents in the facilities. If you're on the phone in a facility, you don't start talking about your case to a friend. They have to designate private areas for you to discuss your case with a lawyer. And obviously, if your case is denied or terminated in court, it's very important, again, for the community members who have the right to reserve the appeal. You want to keep that case going at least until you can have your attorney on board to protect your rights. Patty, do you have anything to add? We have about 5 more minutes.
I do. I actually want to go back to the slide previous, because you mentioned, that you can pay tickets and citations online without admitting guilt. If I can, Meredith, with all due respect, that's actually not necessarily correct. So for citation, sometimes it requires you to admit guilt, so that you avoid going to court and getting arraigned on that. And some offenses, like a shoplifting offense, you could be cited for that and ticketed for that without having to be necessarily, arrested for it. So in certain offenses, have immigration impacts, as you well know, Meredith. So I would not be, here's my rule of thumb. On a ticket, on a citation, unless it's a ticket for a U-turn, or it's, I crossed the lane incorrectly, or speeding, I would not be paying those tickets and citations. I would be saying, I demand a hear or a trial on it, because then not guilty, automatically registered, and then you still have to pay the ticket first before you get to go and have that trial. But I would not be paying those tickets or citations depending on the nature of that citation. So
Yeah,
I
and I think that's
that
well
clear.
taken. I think that's well taken. We really can't give blanket advice on that one, and we'll change that slide in the future. All right.
And then the other thing, someone mentioned, they're very worried they got a jury summons. They're not a U.S. citizen, but if they answer the jury summons and said, I'm not a U.S. citizen, am I exposing myself to potential immigration action against me? No, you need to send back that jury summons and say you're not a U.S. citizen. Only U.S. citizens can serve on the jury.
Okay, and I think we need to get to the questions at this point. And I'm willing to stay a little extra. Patty, can you hang out a little bit?
I can hang out just a few minutes. I've got just a few minutes.
Okay.
Do you want me to go through some of the questions I've seen?
Can we go to the last slide though, just to have the information, contact information? There you go.
some of the questions I've seen, there was a follow-up on the workplace. So there was one that says like, if they're in a public area and do not have a warrant. So again, you had said you can still ask them to leave, right? Like they're disrupting the business, they're in your restaurant lobby, they're making a scene. You can still, if they don't have a warrant, you can say, I would like you to leave, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. And
You
one
can you can refuse this service to anyone. We as attorneys can refuse a potential client. We're like, no, we're not going to take your case. You can refuse service to anyone.
One thing I've seen a lot is, can an unlawful arrest give a right to a lawsuit? I'm curious your opinions on this.
I think those civil rights lawyers that are out there, they need to get on the bandwagon and join us, because I'm not a civil rights lawyer, but what we've seen, what's displayed, what we've seen on TV in the public is clear violations of people's civil rights, and both the rights as a property owner and the rights of those who are detained. So yes.
And
And
if there are questions about other jurisdictions like Texas, Louisiana, we are California lawyers, so I'm sorry, we can't answer that question.
and
Yeah,
another one,
and the other thing that gives rise to potential civil rights lawsuit is this. Again, it goes back, I'm harping back to the issue of, we don't know whether these are federally authorized, statutorily authorized federal officers that are conducting these, these kidnappings, these abductions, these detentions, these arrests, because they will not identify themselves.
and then
And I don't see what the problem is. Why can't they just give a card? Why can't they say, agent so-and-so? Some of them do, but many of them refuse to.
and there's a lot of mask wearing happening as well.
Mhm.
So if they come to your business and they won't leave, they won't show ID, people are asking, what can they do at that point? Should they call the police? I'm curious
Yes.
what you guys think about that. Yeah.
I think so. And then somebody wrote that it's a 3 business day notice is the legal requirement for the I-9.
That's
don't
my
know.
understanding. I'm
That's my
not
understanding,
100% on
72.
it, but that's what I thought as well. So that
72 hours. Yeah, I was thinking of, it's 72 hours. You were right. It's just, I was thinking of 30 days for an appeal thing, but no, it's 72 hours. Mhm.
But the main point there is that notice is required. They can't just show up and on the spot say, oh, I'm here for
Yes.
an I-9 audit. No, you have to give notice on that.
Right. And I understand the frustration in general, right? With people saying, well, if you walk away, you're going to get tackled by these guys that who knows what they are, alleged officers. But again, I've also heard, heroic stories where people actually just calmly are filming, and there are people that come and they are documenting, and they do leave, right? And the person who was filming, unfortunately, didn't have any documentation. So I mean, I think it's really important to discuss the possibilities and learn from other people. Be in community as we're wrapping up. Some tips that are very important. It's very frightening. I mean, I was born here, and we all have anxiety as immigration lawyers, but the people that are directly impacted, please get involved with your local community organization, or it could be whether it's Cheer Love, whether it's your church. I know that different denominations, Catholic, Protestant, they're getting so involved. They're going to be sending witnesses and observers to immigration courts. And there is community. The silver lining to all this, I mean, Patty, myself, a lot of us, Catherine, we're all banding together. We're sharing ideas. We're sharing a meal. We have to kind of combat this inhumanity with extra doses of humanity. So I think that's a really important message. We can talk about the legalities of it all, but I think coming together, getting that support, having signal groups if necessary, right, where you could just talk and not be so isolated, getting a second opinion with an immigration lawyer, and if you don't like the advice, again, sometimes it's better just to wait and not put in that U visa if you have an outstanding order of removal, right? I don't know what Patty has to say.
What I say is, listen, every case is fact specific. We can't talk about it in generalities, because every case is really just a strategy session for me. I look at it as a chessboard, how move my chess piece and how is the government going to move its chess piece? And I'm going to try to, win. I'm always going to try to win, as all of us are going to try to win. But this is a time where we are. I've just never in my lifetime have seen this kind of unlawfulness take place. I understand that federal agents and the federal government has a job to do. I don't think anyone's disputing that. I think there's a better way to do it. There's no uniformity to the way they're handling this. There's no uniformity in terms of uniforms. Someone said they were hiding they're wearing masks because they don't want to be doxxed or something like that. It's not about that. It's about our democracy, and our democracy says we get to face our accusers, right? So I don't know who's trying to grab my friend from the street if they will not identify themselves. So as individuals, as human beings, as people who really believe in the law and the rule of law, we all have to have our voices heard. We cannot remain silent. If we remain silent, we're giving those in power the authority to say what they're doing is okay. And it's absolutely not okay.
And one of the questions also was like, what can bystanders do to help those people who maybe they are
You
US
can
citizens?
shout, don't talk to the eyes. You can document, you can video, you can someone provided a 3-page documentation, the time, everything that they saw and observed at the car wash. And I'm going to give that to a civil rights lawyer, because there's stuff in there that the civil rights lawyer is going to be able to use to probably file a lawsuit. So you can, as a bystander, also help in the protection of our democracy.
I know I saw a TikTok where someone was at a car wash and there was a man there that they were targeting, and she told him in Spanish, don't say a word, and she recorded, and she kind of got in the way.
Yes, that's the car wash I'm talking about.
The officers left. It was great, to see. She advised him of his rights and she was very direct. And it worked in that situation, and it was all documented and shared a lot of times.
And I think it's really important to get active in your community. Again, silver lining. There are amazing mayors. The mayor of Pasadena has been outstanding. I heard an interview with Robert Garcia, member of Congress from Long Beach. Just wonderful, wonderful people that are activating, that are organizing, that are investigating, that are holding hearings. Maybe you could become a witness, a community member that it was attacked by alleged officer, right? I won't even say ICE. We don't know who they are. And I know that also the ACLU, for those who have not heard of them, they're outstanding. ACLU.org, if you want to put it in the chat real quick. They are looking for witnesses, victims, and they are getting some very strong, they've always been at the fore with class action litigation. And I know they would love to hear about these instances of illegality by these officers.
And I know a lot of people have been asking about information. We're actually sending out a list of organizations. If people should have received it. And then the PowerPoint also should have gone out, and this is being recorded, so it will be available. I've seen that come up a lot, that question. So this will be recorded and shared, and I believe it's going to be posted on the LACBA immigration section webpage so that people can access it again.
Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on what I find to be a very important issue of our lifetime. So everybody get involved, shout, speak your voice.
Absolutely, a la orden. So the next round will probably be in Spanish, and we'll look into doing these similar presentations on behalf of LACBA in different languages. So thank you so much for your attention. It's been a pleasure and an honor to be with you.
Yes,
Thank you, everyone. And
thank you.
it's so important. Thank you to our speakers. You guys were amazing. And it's just so important to get this information out to the public, because I feel like so many people want to help. And this is the best way you can help, is arming people with their rights. And so thank you for everybody who shares this information on today.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.